Hello. Just going to work through the opening bit, let a few people join, and we shall get started. Give it another 30 seconds because we've just gone live and it would have just sent a notification to the Way audience and the Way followers, and we'll give them a little while to jump on. Okay, so welcome to 25 Tuesdays with Way in celebration of Way's 25th anniversary. For the next 25 weeks, we'll be telling 25 different stories from people that have, unfortunately had the eligibility to join Way or have been a part of the journey for Way over the past 25 years. My name's Sam Robinson, and I'm a Way member. I joined Way just under 2 years ago, 18 months to 2 years ago, after the passing of my late wife Lauren, who passed away following a 3-year battle with breast cancer at aged 31. I was 32 at the time, and we've got a now 5-year-old daughter Molly, and having found Way a real source of hope, support, and a community that meant something to me, certainly in the first few months after Lauren had passed away. I've taken to supporting them and using my blog and the things that I write about to support Way and try and raise their profile and raise their awareness. The first part of the 25 weeks with Way, 25 Tuesdays with Way, was hosted by Kate and Emma, and they spoke to people that have been a part of the journey. So the faces of Way, Caroline, our founder, or one of the co-founders of Way, and some of our incredible volunteers were there, and you can catch up with those interviews or those talks on our Instagram TV channel or on our YouTube channel. And this week will be the first part of my block of 6, of which Emma will be supporting throughout as well, where we talk to people about books and blogs. So, like me, there are a number of people that have suffered significant bereavement, where writing has become a particularly good outlet for them, where it's been something that allows them to, navigate their journey. And along the next 6 weeks, we'll be lucky enough to talk to a Sunday Times best-selling author, Lucy Brownlee, some Way members such as Steph Nimmo, and also Holly Matthews, who formerly of Waterloo Road, sadly a young widow, has gone on to write books and become somewhat of a life coach, and will be joining us in a couple of weeks' time. So that's really exciting. But our first guest for the Books and Blogs series is Justin Bowen, who has written 2 books, one inspired by his late wife's Facebook posts during her battle with cancer, and one which was inspired by his daughter and one of her paintings. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try and invite Justin into the conversation, and I'm really excited about this. Having had a little chat with Justin, he's got some fantastic ways of talking about death and bereavement and grief, and I'm really excited to bring him into the conversation. So bear with me 1 second. Hopefully he'll be with us in a second.
Hi, Sam.
Hello, Justin.
Good evening.
How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. I'm glad I managed to get this live Instagram thing working. So great. At this second, I'm just very relieved to be here.
Yeah. I mean, it's my first one of the series, so I'm equally relieved. I was sitting here for a couple of minutes before I went live thinking, well, what if everything goes wrong? But we're here, so let's begin. Justin, we had a pre-chat, we had a little bit of a chat late last week, and what was meant to be a small 20-minute, half-hour conversation turned into something that was, over an hour long, and I found it fascinating to hear your take on grief and bereavement and dealing with loss and death within a family. And we had so many things in common about how we took to writing and using words to explore, navigate our grief journey. So Why don't you take us back to the start? You know, talk to us about the wife and how you met Helga and a little bit about your history.
Yeah, so I met Helga back in 2004, well, 2003 when we very first met, and then we sort of got together 2004. Helga was from Belgium, and she, after we had been sort of dating from a distance for a while with various shuttles between the two countries, she eventually moved over here, and then in 2007 we got married, and basically sort of lived quite happily with two children coming along. The first, my son Brennan, who was born in 2012, and then my daughter Sarah, who came along in 2014. And you know, Helga was she was an accountant by trade, and you know, sort of just very successful in what she did. And it was quite a, although her family had a history of cancer, it came as quite a shock when, you know, basically in 2016, when Helga was just 33, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And because of the family history, we, you know, we suspected there was a genetic basis to it. And Helga had always thought that at some point she would get breast cancer. Her mother had died in her 50s. Her grandmother died slightly older. So the assumption was that at some point we would have this thing called cancer coming into our family's life. We didn't expect it so young. And, you know, from that sort of early diagnosis, which was then subsequently confirmed being due to an abnormal gene called the PALB2 gene, as we found out later. We sort of began this journey, and as so many families do, you know, and you yourself know, you don't expect it at that young age. Now, because we had two young children, we made a conscious decision that we would just be, how can I say it? We would live life on the basis that Helga would live a long and happy life. We would trust the treatments. We would believe and operate on the assumption that they would work and that Helga would be around for many, many years. At the same time, we knew there was a possibility that wouldn't be the case. So we, alongside that, were very open with the children. Now, you know, one of the things that, you know, I always say to people is there isn't a right or wrong way, is there, of dealing with cancer diagnosis? And so we just, you know, I know people have gone the other way. And as far as I'm concerned, you have to do what's right for you as individuals and for your family. But that was the approach that we adopted, was that we would just work on the basis that all would be well for many, many, many years, but we would be very open with the children on what the treatment was, what was happening, and, you know, and that's really how we went on for the next sort of 3.5 years. So.
And how old were your children at the time, Justin?
So Bren and Seren, so at the time of diagnosis, Bren was 4 and Seren was 2. So, you know, and there were, you know, there was a really good book that we used called Mummy's Lump, which helped us explain things to the children. And, you know, so we, you know, we encourage those sort of open conversations. And, but at the same time, I mean, the thing I often said to the children was that I believe that Mummy will live until she's old and croaky and walks with a stick, and she'll be around for many, many years until you've got children of your own. But if that changes, I promise I'll tell you. And the thing, you know, basically for the next almost 3.5 years, I was able to maintain that position. And then sort of in well, basically on July the 5th, 2019, we were told that the treatment was no longer working and that there was nothing else they would do. And basically then a month later, Helga died. So we went from working on that basis that, you know, even when treatments stop working, as they do, I'm sure that was part of your experience as well, you'd be on a treatment, it'd all be going really well, and then it would stop working. We always then, you know, we had a sort of saying between ourselves, we'd give ourselves, every time it stopped working, we'd give ourselves 2 days of grieving to sort of feel, you know, rubbish. And then we would carry on the basis that the new treatment would work, and this is how it would go. So when we got that news in that July that it had stopped working, that in some ways was a bigger shock than the original diagnosis, because we'd got so used to living on the basis of, well, it'll work, and if that doesn't work, there'll be something else. So you know, so that was probably the hardest moment, I would say. You know.
Yeah, you tend to hang on to hope, don't you? At every stage, there's a new bit of hope to try and cling on to. You know, I know in my experience with Lauren, you know, every time there was a change in diagnosis, or, you know, blood levels weren't responding to treatment in the way that they should, or something along those lines, we'd take, you know, like you said, some time where it hit us hard, but actually then we'd be saying, well, hang on, because they did say, you know, there's this new treatment, or, you know, if we can get your blood counts up, or, you know, there was always a glimmer of hope in each, you know, even to the day that she went to the hospice, and the plan was that she would go in for pain management, and the hope was that she would come home a few days later. That didn't transpire, but you kind of cling on to hope at each stage, don't you, and just sort of push your way through.
Yeah, and it's a mindset that we developed of, you know, we knew the risks, we knew the possibilities, but we would live our life on the basis that all would be well. And we made a clear, conscious decision on that. I mean, you know, I remember very, very early on, you know, probably in the first month after diagnosis, Helga and I having a conversation of saying, we don't know now how long is left. You know, the treatment could work and Helga could live for the rest of her life, but there is that possibility that it could be 6 months, 12 months. And so something would come at some point. And because we didn't know how long we had left, we didn't want to waste whatever time we had worrying about something that might not happen for many, many years. Yeah. So it was a conscious decision that we made. And that was how we went on. But you know, as I always say, you know, I said it earlier, you know, every family has to honour their own personality, circumstances. I've got, you know, very dear friends who went the complete opposite way, you know, and to me that is just as valid as the approach we took, because it's about honouring yourself and being true to, you know, your own personality and your loved ones' personalities and the needs of your family. So
yeah, I suppose you're dealing with the undealable, right? Nobody expects to be in that situation, so, you know, nobody really prepares for it. So you just do what you can do to get by, right? And yeah, like you said, there is no right or wrong. There's just what's right for you.
Exactly.
And doing what's right now is something that always springs to mind, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, it sounds like you've handled it, you know, incredibly well given the circumstances. And your first book that you released was based around Helga documenting her battle with cancer on Facebook, right? So it was called Fighting for This Life, I believe. And can you tell us how that came about?
So because Helga was from Belgium and she worked for a multinational company, she had links all around the world. She had family in Belgium, you know, friends literally across the world. So, you know, again, quite early on, we talked about how we're going to keep all these people updated on the story of how things are going. And I mean, Helga was quite prolific on Facebook. She'd sort of set up various groups, networks, etc. So we said, well, why don't we just say to people, this is how we're going to do it. We're not going to have multiple conversations at every stage. We're not going to update everybody, you know, on every treatment plan or any change in the treatment, etc. We're going to do it through Facebook. And basically that's what we did from, literally the point of diagnosis. Either Helga or I would post something about how it was going. Helga would often, it was really interesting actually when I looked back at it, because Helga's perspective was very much about how it was for her going through this journey, and she had this wicked sense of humour. So it really came through in what she wrote and how she wrote about the treatment and the journey that she was on. And mine was sort of, I was like the narrator, for the family. I would sort of just give the factual bits, interspersed with photos of pints when we'd had really good news and we were going to celebrate. And so this was how this, when I looked back after Helga's death, literally just a few months after she died, and I started to look back and read some of the posts, and I thought, what a great record this would be for our children, because it literally told the whole journey in either, in Helga's words or my narratives all the way through. So I sort of came up with the idea of printing off, going back through all the old posts, printing them off, collating them, putting them in a folder. And anyway, as time went on, I would tell friends and family what I was doing, and they would say, "Oh, when you're finished, can I have a copy?" And and somebody else actually said, "You know what? That would be really useful for people to read," because they knew what Helga's posts had been like. And so anyway, to cut a long story short, I decided to I'd have a go at putting it all together as a book. Had a few people who sort of had books published give me some great advice, and about 18 months after I started it, out popped Fighting for This Life, Our Cancer Journey, and it went straight onto Amazon, so I published it through Amazon, which was the easiest way of self-publishing, I found. And it was just a really lovely moment, because the thing that happened was the kids made it theirs, and they felt, when they both had their own copy, and there was a bit of local press coverage, and the pride they got that their mum's story was not only being told, but actually that anyone could get it. And and what's been, so it was published just almost a year ago now, and what's been really wonderful is so I did a Kindle version as well, and basically I was looking back just this morning, and I think it was something like number 25 on the Amazon.com Kindle top 100 books on cancer. And so of course, when the kids see this, they just absolutely love this, that there's somebody somewhere, and I worked out someone reads it almost every other day. In fact, it's the last month, it's been every day for some reason. It seems to have really sort of increased over the last month or two. So for the children in particular to see that their mum's story is out there and people are reading it, and I'm assuming getting some benefit from doing so, is just fantastic, so that's been wonderful.
And you sort of talk there about what it's done for the children in terms of, their mum's story and how they've owned it and it's been nice for them. But how is it that it's helped you, and what has it given to you in such a, outstanding legacy document, really? I know that's going to be there forever, and I've no doubt that Helga would be incredibly proud.
So the writing of it, was fascinating to me, because, and it turned into something that I didn't expect, and it taught me a lot about actually my bereavement and my grief, because as when your wife, partner, dearest person dies, one of the common things which is said is about how time will heal. And actually what the book taught me was time itself doesn't do it, because what I had to do in order to go back through those Facebook posts and read them over and over and over again. I had to fully engage with what I'd lost. I had to engage with my grief, and I had to do it over and over and over again. And every reading of it was me standing in front of Helga and our life together and what I'd lost. But actually, that process, as hard as it was, as time went on, I actually used to, there came a point when I used to, I had to do some editing or do some work on it. And I actually used to look forward to going back and reading it because of the way I was able to connect with, our life, and the easing of my grief in that process. And it actually became a really therapeutic process for me. So, I mean, I lost track how many times I've read the book. It must be, dozens at least, and now I look back on it with real fondness because not only of the legacy for the children, but actually the way it helped me in my bereavement and my process of grieving by gave me a vehicle to engage in my grief in a way that I might not have had from anything else. So
yeah, I similar to you. I think that one of the things that has helped me, time is irrelevant in my mind. Actually, we spoke at depth on our call the other day about how the size of grief doesn't really change. It's how much you engage with it and how much you build around it and how much you will yourself to grow, because that's always going to fill the same size hole that it filled the first day. If you imagine it as a swimming pool, it's always going to be that same Olympic-sized swimming pool. Sometimes you'll take a dip in it and tread water, and when you're treading water, all you think about is yourself. You think about the pool that you're in. But you get back to climbing out on the side, going to the changing rooms and getting on with your life outside of that swimming pool. Right? For me, it's about building your life, growing your life, but you only do that by accepting and dealing with what's in front of you, right? And I think there's lots of common misconceptions about grief and grief journeys and grief theory, and Tonkin's model of grief is pretty much what I've just explained there, which was revolutionary for me because I was kind of expecting something different to what I experienced, based on what the world had taught me up to that point. I think as an individual, I've grown as a result of the trauma that I've been through for those various reasons. And writing was something that certainly helped me in the same way that it helped you, because you were facing the emotions that you were feeling at any given moment. So what's really interesting for me, and actually the bit that I'm looking forward to most, was talking about your inspiration for the second book. And one of the things that we spoke about, and I found some of the things that you said in the way that you explained death and bereavement to your children just profound. I have since even started explaining to Molly in some similar ways, because it really clicked with me. So you've moved from the first book, which was Helga's Facebook posts, and you've your narrative in between, and you did mention that there was a closing section that was yours, that was about a year on. Is there anything you want to pick up on that before we move into the second book?
I mean, it's just that thing of the end of Fighting for This Life was there's a section which is the post that I wrote a year to the day after Helga died, and I wrote it really for my friends, and family, and for anyone kind of who is in the middle of their grief, just to really show that grief isn't linear. It doesn't sort of start with a maximum point and then sort of get progressively down over time, as we've talked about. But actually, by engaging in it, people talk about the waves of grief, and what I put in this post, which is at the end of the book, is that to begin with, the waves, they are constant. They come crashing over you, and all you can do is hang on. But if you if you can hang on, then eventually there starts to be little gaps, little gaps in those waves of grief. And in those moments, the way I describe it is, if you can just find, look around and just see the little bits of blue in the sky, which for me was, the moments of joy with my children, really kind of making the most of those little moments of pleasure amidst the waves of grief, that actually that becomes a habit. And the more you do that, so the gaps between those waves get bigger, until eventually you get to a stage where you can really stand there and see that, there is much still to enjoy in life. And that was really the kind of the message, that I wanted to give people was, if you can just hang on, make the most of those little moments of joy and pleasure that will come, and then you will find things. That's how things get easier, and that will take as long as it takes. So
absolutely, and there's no fixed time, and it's different for everybody, right? It's kind of the theme of the start of our conversation is there is no right or wrong. There is just what's right for you, and whether it be a year, 2 years, 10 years, however long it takes for you to start seeing those gaps and feeling that you're a little lighter and you're not treading water in that deep swimming pool. You're climbing out of the edge and trying to move to the changing rooms. That's your journey, and it's so individual, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about the second book then, because like I said, I was so fascinated by some of the ways that you explained how you're dealing with your children's grief and bereavement. I was in awe of some of the things that you were explaining to me, and I was thinking, wow, I didn't even think about that. So the fact that we had that conversation and hopefully we'll share some of those things now will help other people.
So to be the rainbow, I started that during lockdown, actually. So I'd started, so Fighting for This Life, I'd started a few months after Helga died. And then, which was sort of the October when I started writing that. But then it was in the February, March when we all went into lockdown. And I had sold our family business. So I was at home, just me and the kids. And, I'd have evenings. So I started to think about the support we'd been given by the children's school, which had been absolutely wonderful. We were very, very lucky. And as I joined Way by then, and I was reading other people's stories and some of the struggles that they had with their children's schools. And, I started to think, well, I'd like to sort of try and take some of the great support we had and, do something with that so that could be replicated across other schools. But at that stage, it was just a vague idea. And then there came a point about a year after Helga had died when my daughter, who was 6 by then, she painted this picture. And it was this picture of this rainbow, but in the midst of this crashing storm. There were, lots of clouds, lots of rain, and then this beautiful bright rainbow in the middle. And I remember the conversation because I said to her, what a lovely painting. He said, do you want to tell me what it is? And she said, well, the rain and the storm, she said, that's what I sometimes feel like inside. And, I said, okay, tell me more. And he said, but the rainbow, he said, is the bits that make me feel better. And I said, okay, so what are the things that make you feel better? And one of the things she said was school. So, I had seen the support, and so I had felt that it was really good support. But actually then to hear from my daughter that she recognized that school had helped her feel better, that was when something clicked. And that was when I then decided to really crack on and do this second book as well, called Be the Rainbow. And basically what I did was I used the experience that we had. So I worked with the school in terms of the process that they had gone through. I was in touch with some a clinical psychologist, an educational psychologist, one of whom actually was a Way member as well, and some other teachers that I knew. And I had, in a previous career, I run a youth offending team for a number of years, so I had an understanding of sort of good processes to assess and plan and deliver really good support. And basically, over the following year, 18 months that followed, I set about creating this guide for professionals working in schools that would hopefully replicate the kind of support that we had had. Because one of the things as I started to look into the big discrepancies in the, how good support was. Sometimes it could be very good, sometimes it could be appalling. I wanted every bereaved child to benefit from the same experience that my children had had. So that was how Be the Rainbow came about. But one of the things that that you and I talked about the other day is every family's circumstances are different. Every parent faces their own struggles, their own difficulties. So, how I've been with my children, I feel very lucky because I've been able to do that because the circumstances and that I find myself in and the support we've had. And one of the things for me is, although that's not going to be possible for every family, what we can expect and should expect is that the professionals around those families and those children are delivering consistently good support. So that's really become my mission, is to try and, use Be the Rainbow to, let's not, it shouldn't be down to luck. So let's get away with it being down to luck, and let's actually put in place a framework that schools can pull off the shelf, that's very user-friendly, which is what I've tried to do with Be the Rainbow. Just make it very, very simple and easy for schools, teachers, professionals to use, so that every bereaved child gets that support that they need and deserve, because they've been through enough.
That's quite incredible. And talk to me about how the book does that then. So, obviously without giving too much away or give away as much as you like, but, what sort of things are in the book that people can, whether it be the school, whether it be somebody that picks up the book outside of an educational environment, what is it that it does to help with that?
Well, I think one of the big takeaways that I hope people have who look at the book is, so there are two sides to it. One is about having a very clear, simple, systematic approach to supporting children. So do a proper assessment, and there's a toolkit in there, a very simple, user-friendly toolkit for assessing. Then putting together a really good plan, and again, I've put a toolkit there, so it's all there, and then actually making sure that you do the things that you promise you will do. But one of the things I try to do with the toolkit, for example, the assessment tool, is to help professionals and actually give them the permission to ask the difficult questions that they need to ask. So, because one of the things that I found, listening to other people's stories, is that adults are very frightened of talking about death, particularly with children. There are a lot of taboos about it. They'll talk in, for example, euphemisms about how a child has lost their parent. Well, they haven't lost them. The child's mind, if you say you've lost your parent, it causes confusion. Yeah, they've died. So using the words dead, dying, death, the toolkit gives professionals permission to use those words and to ask the difficult questions. How did your important person die? But it's directed at the parents, so the questions aren't asked of the children with the assessment tool. But actually being able to use those words is really, really important, and we've got to try and break down some of those taboos, which is basically because the adults understandably feel uncomfortable. They don't want to upset the child.
Yeah, well, I was just about to say that, certainly in my experience as well, is those conversations are difficult because they're difficult for the adult, not the child. You know, every time I've had to have a challenging conversation with Molly, it has made me feel horrendous in the build up to that conversation. You know, I've read books in preparation for trying to make sure I use the right words. I've tried really, really hard to make sure that I deliver those messages in clear and concise ways, but been, you know, utterly anxious about the outcome, how she'll respond, what it will do, will it unsettle her, will, you know. And the reality of the situation is children are so resilient. They're so brave. They're so courageous. They're so strong. They take that information in the way that you deliver it. And if you deliver it without ambiguity, and you're clear with them, and you don't mince your words, then, you know, they tend to respond better. But again, it comes down to doing what's right for, you know, at that period of your time as the parent. You're going through enough difficulty. So actually, the approach of supporting the schools with those conversations, as a, you know, a invested person in that child's life that is emotionally removed from the situation, I think is fantastic. Now, I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, Justin. I'll ask for forgiveness rather than permission. But one of the things that you said to me that really, really stuck to me, and again, it comes down to your own beliefs, your culture. There's lots of things that go into it. But we spoke about how you explained, or the things that you have explained to your children in that what we do and we don't know about death, you know, about how somebody can't come back. But you gave this wonderful analogy of energy that I just was mesmerized by, and have tried in a much less successful way, I think, to deliver a similar message to Molly. So could you just share that with me? And, you know, then we've got it on this video. I think it'd be something that's really lovely for people to hear.
Well, it was something. So I'm not a scientist. You know, I'm just sort of have an amateur passing interest in physics and the mind and the brain. And I read something some time ago, which was a lovely passage that talked about having, rather than sort of have a you know, a vicar at a funeral, have a physicist, because the physicist will explain how you know, how the energy of people is always with us. And I sort of took that and adapted it really for my own little bits of knowledge, and in a way that I wanted to speak to my children, because people say all different things to children when somebody dies, you know, which is fine, you know, that they've gone to heaven, that they're with the angels, that they're with the stars, what, you know, whatever it is, to give comfort. And I wanted to give something which I could say to the children, I know this to be true. Because the one thing we don't know for sure about when somebody dies is actually what happens. Nobody knows. So I wanted to give them something concrete that I could say, this is true. You are free to believe whatever you want, but I can tell you this. And so the way I started to talk to them about it was how the brain works when we are with somebody, you know, and there are different parts to it. So, for example, you know, when we look at somebody and they're in front of us, what we see is not with our eyes, it's with our mind. That's, you know, the photons bounce off the backs of our eyes, and that sparks the neurons in our brain, and then that creates a pattern, you know, which, you know, scientists can observe of electrical impulses within the brain. And then if you close your eyes and think of what you've just seen, it creates exactly the same pattern. So one of the things that I've said to the children is, so when, you know, those neurons spark and those pulses are firing, it's creating little bits of heat. And one of the things we know, because it's the law of energy conservation, it's one of the laws of physics, is that energy can't be destroyed. It doesn't die. It can be transformed, and I have absolutely no idea what happens to it, but accept this law that energy is transformed into something else, which then goes out to where in the universe, maybe stays around us. And so every time we think of that person, what we see in our mind is exactly the same pattern as if they were still stood in front of us. So that energy is exactly the same as if they're still here. And actually, the converse of that is that every time that person looked at us and those neurons fired in their brain, that energy is still there. The energy that they had from seeing us is still there somewhere. I don't know what it is, but it's in a form that is different to what it was when it was heat, but it's there. So they stay with us. And actually, that's the same with every hug, every kiss, every touch, every time we hear their voice and they heard our voice, our brains are firing and that energy stays with us or is somewhere in the universe, as I understand it, forever. So I told my children that, and I got them each a photo of them as individuals with their mom, and sort of made a poster out and put this, this passage into a poster, made it into a poster and hang it on their wall. And, they both, just, it's brought such comfort to them because it's rooted in something we can say for sure,
That we know, yeah, that's real, amongst a lot of the ambiguity.
Yeah.
I really appreciated you sharing that with me on the phone, and actually again today it was lovely, and I liked the way as well on the phone that you said about all of those things, all of those moments, that the energy of that you have created, that energy, they're in the bank, they're there forever, they don't go away. You've got those, no matter what happens from this day forward, they're there. You keep those, and I really like that. That was lovely. So, sort of moving into the final bits now. We've got probably a little while longer, but not too much longer. How are you all doing now? It's 3 years, I think, post Helga's sad death, and what's going on now, and what's the future hold? And how did Way help you in your journey as well? Because obviously this is on Way's Instagram channel, and I always talk about Way as being the charity that you don't know and you need until you need it. It's not like one of the massive cancer charities where everybody knows about it and everybody's raising money for it. It's sadly exclusive to a small minority of the population.
Yeah.
So talk to us about how Way's helped you and how you guys are doing now, and what the future holds.
So I joined Way about 3 months after Helga died, and the thing I found, because obviously one of the main sort of benefits that you get from it is being part of the Facebook group and the messaging pages, etc. And so just being connected with like-minded people, and going on a few of the sort of regional, we had a few nights out, meals together, and just getting that feeling of not being alone, because friends and family are amazing. Again, I've been so blessed with the friends and family I have around me and the children. But there's something about being able to talk with people who are in exactly the same boat that has a value that you can't really describe. So that was really important to me, and all through my sort of journey and my writing, and I would share that with other Way members, and that sort of encouraged me to keep going because of the way they were responding. So Way, being part of that Way community has just been, it's hard for me to put into words actually the value that had, but probably the biggest thing I can say is it encouraged me to keep writing and to keep engaging it with my grief in the way that I was. So that's, and that, that has carried on. But one of the things that I then found, so we sort of had all the lockdown and the craziness of that time. But as we came out of that, I then started to think about, where I was at. in my journey and my future. And one of the important things for me was I reached a point of acceptance. And what that acceptance was that it was me and the children, and that might be it for the rest of my life. I might not have another relationship. And I found a peace with that. And, there came a point, probably, I would say sort of September last year, just after, around September, I would say, after we sort of came out of that, those lockdowns. And I reached this point of acceptance and peace with my circumstances. But alongside that, I then started to feel, well, okay, I can do this. But wouldn't it be nice if there was somebody else to share my life with? And so I started to think about, the possibility of dating. And again, through Way, just talking with other members and, seeing what other people's experience was. I sort of opened up to the possibility of meeting somebody. And I was very lucky enough to, meet a lovely lady who we're now fully in a relationship with. And it's just really, wonderful because, I had to wait until I was ready and until I had accepted, where I was in life and had found my peace with myself and my circumstances before I was ready. But having done that, as I say, I'm, very lucky now that, I've got this lovely lady who the children absolutely think the world of, and vice versa. She, is wonderful with them. And, it's brought home to me how, wonderful life can be, because, it's reminded me of how wonderful life can be, because it's, after everything that we go through, when we lose the person who we believe that we would spend the rest of our life with, to actually then come to a point where we are open to the possibility of meeting somebody else, and then actually to act on that, and then to meet somebody who you feel really happy with. I mean, it's just, wonderful. And, it just reminds me that it's, I guess, it's worth doing. It's worth, going through that difficult process, because if you can keep going, then eventually you can come to a point where happiness is possible again. And I think that's what I would say to people.
And we spoke about on the phone how it's almost a strange juxtaposition, isn't it? It's almost how can being through something that's so devastating almost make you come out of the other end and almost increase your bandwidth for happiness, or increase your appreciation for life, and make you push harder into those new situations. And it's a situation I share. I'm too in a new relationship, and value it incredibly, and I think that loss that you suffer supports that boosted value of what life is to be. Making the choice to live. Well, it's not really a choice. You get to that point of acceptance, but moving from surviving to living is a big part of the journey. And again, there's no timelines on it. There's no right or wrongs to it. But you get to a point of acceptance, and actually you want to live for you, because certainly in our situation, the person that you lost didn't get to choose, right? In varied situations, everybody's lost for different reasons. But for me, I certainly see it as an honor to Lauren that I choose to live, and I choose to live a happy and fulfilled life. Because she, didn't get that choice that was taken from her at a young age. So, it's something that we share in terms of our experience. So, and how are the children now? How are they doing?
They're fantastic. I mean, they, I guess, they've benefited from the journey that we've been on and the way we've functioned as a family, because it was right for them. And again, I come back to, you have to honour how your family are and how your family functions. For us, being open, being positive, that's benefited them. Now, one of the things I talk about in Be the Rainbow is how, children grieve differently to us. They, for them, it's like jumping in puddles. One minute they can be in their grief, and then the next minute they're asking what's for tea. And as adults, and it's again one of the things that I talk about and I encourage professionals to be aware of, is as adults we've got to be prepared to move with them. So we don't define them by their grief. We are led by how they are. So when they're in their grief, hold them emotionally. And even now, my children will, there'll be some nights, when it's quiet, when they'll think of their mom and they'll get upset. And for a short time, I'll hold them, they'll be in their grief. And it'll change like that. And then they'll be wanting to talk about, playing,
whatever it is,
friends, having a drink, whatever. And we've got to be prepared to move with it. And that's, if we can do that, then they become comfortable with their grief, because they start to see that they are free to be in it when they feel that they want to be in it, and to go and play and be happy and enjoy life when that's what they want to do. And that's, as adults, that's our challenge, is to provide an environment in which they can do that. And I'm very lucky with all the people I've got around me, the support from the school, that I've got people who understand that. So my children are, fortunately doing incredibly well. And, I just feel very blessed, really, at how things are. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's nice to hear that they're doing well. And actually, between you all, you've developed an understanding of, what you need and how best to support one another. So that's great. So I'm going to try and wrap us up now, Justin. Otherwise, I'm sure the team at Way will slap me on the wrist, because I promised to keep this under an hour, and we're knocking on the door. But before we close, one of the things that I'd like to ask you, is if there was any advice from your perspective for any other young widows, any, specifically in our situation, dads of young children, or people that wanted to take to blogging and writing books as a way of navigating their journey with such severe emotion, what would you say to them? What would be your advice?
It's we could do a whole program on that, couldn't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
The biggest thing I would say is don't be afraid to ask for help, for males in particular. That's just that's the biggest thing, I think. Don't be afraid to ask for help. We can't do it all. We can't be perfect. We can't make up for what they've lost. So sometimes we're going to need help, and I think asking for help is the absolute biggest takeaway. There are lots of other things that we could say, and maybe we should do something else on that, but
yeah, absolutely. I feel a podcast coming on or something, Justin. I think we could talk for hours about all of it. Similar in a similar vein to you, one of the things that I've really, I mean, it was a theme I had lots of counselling, and a theme of the counselling was accepting what good enough looks like, and actually we can all be good enough, and our best is good enough. And we all put a lot of pressure on ourselves to get everything right. But as we've said, there's really no right or wrong. It's just about doing what's right now and getting through, because it's an unprecedented circumstance that you find yourself in. You don't expect to be there. So that was a great bit of advice, and we've just had someone comment saying some great advice. Thank you. So that makes it worthwhile, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm just going to close there, Justin. And if there's anything you'd like to close with about the books themselves, I believe that Fighting for This Life is available on Amazon Kindle Unlimited.
Yes.
And Being the Rainbow is...
Be the Rainbow's on Amazon as well. Yeah.
Okay, great.
There's I actually managed to make a little website for that, betherainbow.co.uk. So people can go and have a look on there. So
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time. And I'm just going to close by letting people know that I'll be back next week at the same time, so 8 o'clock on Tuesday. And I'll be talking to Emma Waring, who's based in Northern Ireland and lost her husband in 2020. Mike died in 2020. She started a blog called All at Sea. So, anybody that's interested, if you've enjoyed today, I'm sure that next week will be equally interesting. So join us at 8 next week. And then every week on Tuesday at 8 p.m. for the following weeks, where we'll talk to some of those exciting guests that I mentioned at the start. So I've been Sam. This is Justin, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Goodbye.